We are the tribe from the north, we're brave and we're bold. Defeating our rivals never gets old. Making our way to the Big Sky Conference. Watch out, 'cause here comes the silver and gold. Whoa, whoa. This is Tubbs at the Club for the Vandals of Idaho.
Welcome back, Tribe from the North, Brave and Bold, to the official, unofficial podcast of your Idaho Vandals and the Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brian Marceau, joined today. You guys will notice Dallas Hammer is not here. He's on the IR, or if he's not on the IR, he's out of town. Marten, I heard laughing in the background, which makes me believe Amateur Hour has already started, but I was reading off a script, so I missed it. Everyone, that's producer Marten Heemstra, who,
hello.
You can tell me what I miss.
Nothing.
It's like a curse that keeps following the Tribune people.
Okay. And look, listeners now are going to have absolutely no idea what the hell the pause is for. But listeners will notice, that was a new voice you heard. We're joined today by Teren Kowatsch, current Idaho beat reporter for the Lewiston Tribune. Teren, first time on the show. How's it going?
Going great. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, I first ran into Teren at Media Day in Spokane. And it took a couple seconds. Like, I knew you were familiar. You seemed Idaho-centric because everyone who's not Montana, if you go to Media Day, like, it's pretty clear who's following Montana State. And the rest, you can just tell. It's like when my wife was in law school and I'd go to law school parties. You could tell who the law school students were and the hangers-on. And I would go find all the other hangers-on and have a good time. Kind of like we did at Media Day. But Teren, we're going to jump in right away to Around the Bar, brought to us by Hughes River Expedition. Before, just to give people a background, you cover, this is not your first fall camp covering Idaho football. Is that correct?
Yeah. So last year, I was lucky enough to be asked by Giovanni Mccoy, who was the editor-in-chief of the Argonaut at the time, if I wanted to cover football. And you know, I covered the team that whole season. I also covered the basketball team as well. And then, graduated, started working at the Tribune, and as football season rolled around, Steph, who is the last beat reporter, moved to WSU. Dale Gremmert, who's the old Idaho guy, moved to the news desk. And, you know, I'm kind of like the in-between guy until Trevin Pixley comes down from Sandpoint and starts doing his thing. But yeah.
So look, you broke the lead. I know we're going to talk about football. The whole show's about football, but you have to tell us. Covering last year's basketball team, 60 seconds. Is that the highlight of your last decade?
Oh, man, the basketball team is a weird spot for me because I'm definitely more of a football guy, but gosh, last year it was a weird season, but I think it was a special season. I think is a good term for it.
That's a good way to just close that out. And I really just had to ask a basketball question. We have some listeners who believe that I am committed to bringing up basketball when I don't need to. And so they know, oh, they're right. If I can bring up basketball for no reason, I'm going to do it. I already did. But we've taken the veggie segue already. So we're going to jump into football. Look, the first question, because Teren, you've been, obviously you've talked to Jason Neck through Media Day. You've been to, I mean, there's not been that many fall camp practices yet. You've been to a handful of them. You're honestly the person to follow for written work relating to Idaho fall camp right now, you guys, if you check Teren's work out at the LM Tribune, or it's published on Moscow Daily News, Pullman Daily News as well, correct?
Yeah, it's published in both.
Okay. So, look, we just have to get to the big story. On this show, we've tried forever to not do like the dumbest person in the world version of talking about football, where like you always talk about quarterback and only quarterback. But we can't skip over this because this is one of the more exciting and easy to follow position battles on the team. based off what you've seen so far, just give us a rundown of, I mean, does it look like, how's the snap count look? Does it look like we have a leader emerging? You just grab the wheel, and then I'll play back later.
Yeah. So the first 3 days of practice, each quarterback, I think, had the best day. Jabori, I think, had the best first day. And then CJ and Giovanni each split one the next 2 days. And Saturday's practice I wasn't able to go to, so I didn't see how that one looked. But the last couple days, it looks like it's, CJ's been the most consistent of the three. He, today he made, during 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s, I don't think he missed a throw. I cannot think of a play off the top of my head that he missed. The last couple practices, I think, have definitely been his best since they started on Wednesday. That being said, I do think this quarterback competition is definitely not closed yet. I think, scrimmage can happen and either Jabori or Giovanni can have a really good performance and just blow this thing up again, because neither Jabori or Giovanni have looked bad. Both have looked also really good and have shown mobility, which is where we thought that was CJ's thing, but Jabori and Giovanni have also shown an ability to escape and scramble if need be. So I still think this quarterback competition is thin. I don't think it's CJ's yet, because I think they're going to, wait to see what happens through scrimmage. But right now it looks like CJ's in the lead.
So right now, look, we're recording this on August 9th. You're referring to the scrimmage on August 11th, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. When you talked to Jason Eck at Media Day, did he make reference to wanting to have the quarterback position wrapped up, not rushed, but not dragging on? Look with Paul Petrino for his last couple seasons, not counting the spring. It took a while to get the quarterback situation 100% clear. So you're saying Jason Eck told you as well he expected to try to have this done, before the season starting?
He definitely said that he is going to have a starter by the time Washington State rolls around.
Okay.
He said that they will wean through, get each quarterback equal first team reps, and as practices go on, it's going to eventually transition to whoever's in the lead or whoever's going to win it, getting the majority of those. But yeah, he made it pretty clear week 1 was the deadline, I think. Okay.
Week 1 of the season. Okay.
Yeah, against WSU.
Did you cover Idaho football during the spring?
No, I did not. It was just during last fall.
Okay. So this is going to be tough to compare. But the reason why I was bringing that up is from what we had been told during spring ball, the quarterbacks, and this is not shocking to have new offense, and also with quarterbacks where they're splitting reps amongst multiple guys. So where it's tough for someone to get into a groove in the same kind of way. We were told, and from the spring scrimmage itself, people saw CJ and Giovanni. Look, they're having a rough time. There's no real way around that.
Right.
But what you're describing is, one, if CJ had a rough time in the spring, he's made some pretty significant growth in terms of comfort, in terms of command, between what people saw in the spring scrimmage and what you've been seeing through practice.
Yeah, I think he and Giovanni have both really improved from the spring. From talking to Steph and how he described how that scrimmage ended and how they've been playing now, I think they've really been working over the summer.
One of the things Luke Schleisner said on our show, and we'd had other people tell us, is one of the issues CJ had in the spring was kind of trying to force big plays a little bit too much, which would lead to holding on to the ball too long, which then led to just far too many sacks. Based off what you've seen, that's improved significantly.
Oh yeah. He still definitely takes the shots for sure. He had one play today that was to Alex Moore, that a one-handed catch on the front pylon, and he just immediately sprinted down the field to congratulate Alex. But he's done a lot better job, I think, from what I've seen, of taking what the defense gives him. Obviously he still scrambles. He's still going to use his mobility to extend plays. That's one of his best traits, but he's doing a lot better job at not taking every single deep pass. He's made a lot better decisions, I think.
Okay, and we're going to shift out of quarterbacks in a second, but I got about 3 short questions left. One, could you, just because unless our listeners watch 2019 tape of Jabari Gibbs at South Dakota State, just haven't seen a ton of what Jabari looks like. From what you've seen, could you describe, let's say, what type of quarterback he looks like, what appear to be strengths, like if he's the guy? Because I mean, he was a starting quarterback on a good team as a freshman, but of course things change. What kind of player does he look like so far?
He looks like a guy who is very knowledgeable and has a very good handle on the offense, which makes sense because he played with Eck and Schleissner in South Dakota State. I think he definitely has the best touch when it comes to deep ball. He knows how to place it. And, I think that first day they were running post corners, and every single throw he had was on the money. And there has been a couple things where it's like, I think it just comes down to like him trying to get the timing down with the receivers. Cause obviously this is a new roster for him. He knows what Eck and Schleissner wants, but it's kind of, he's still learning how the players run their routes and when they get to certain marks that maybe at South Dakota State, working with guys like Pierre Strong and Tucker Kraft, that was completely different. But I think he has the best handle on the offense still, and I think he definitely has the best touch on the ball. He's also the least mobile of the 3, but he is capable of using his legs when he has to.
So when he runs, if is Jabari Gibbs as a rusher, is it more of like an opportunistic thing to extend plays?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a take it if that's what you have type of deal, not seeking. He's always going to be seeking to throw the ball, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now Giovanni Mccoy, who, if you watched Idaho in 2021, you probably saw Giovanni play. He played against 2 of the best teams Idaho played the entire season, Eastern Washington and Montana. And one of those games was on pretty minimal prep.
Yeah.
What kind of player, how would you describe Giovanni McCoy as a player?
I think he has the strongest arm of the 3. I think in terms of just pure arm strength, he has the best arm. And I think he's done a really good job at, adding kind of like that mobility to his game. Cause that was like one thing I think against Eastern and Montana. And it's obviously hard to scramble a whole lot against Montana because that front 7 is scary. But he's shown a lot of improved decision-making, I think, from when he was, which I don't think really you can use those 2 games to knock him. He was a true freshman kind of thrown to the wolves, but he's done a really good job at, I think, showing a lot of improvement in his decision-making, in his ability to extend plays. And he's shown off his arm strength, I think, plenty of times over the course of practice.
Sorry, we have a cat intrusion. The question we have, it's from the comment thread, but I'm going to make it slightly more broad. Listener Tom Kendall asked if Ridge Dutchakal has been playing and how he's looked. But in addition to Ridge, could you give just a quick rundown of what we've seen out of all the freshmen, which would include Ridge Dutchakal, Tyler Webb, and Jack Lane?
Yeah.
Freshman quarterbacks, guys.
Yeah. So Jack Lane, he actually has been practicing a lot with Giovanni Jabari and CJ, not as a member of the quarterback competition, but when the 3 quarterbacks were still splitting reps equally among the ones, they put Jack in with the 2s, and that was like day 2 or 3 of practice. So he's, I think, a lot farther ahead than a lot of people thought he was going to be coming into camp. Ridge and Tyler have also both looked great, but Jack, I think, is definitely farther along than what a lot of people thought he would have been.
Yeah, Jack was a guy who I went to the Coeur d'Alene VSF signing day event, and Jason Eck had referenced him as a great candidate to become a linebacker, which then, based off what you've seen in practice, saying Jack Lane he's moved up in the position grouping. And that's maintained. That happened pretty early. That
happened pretty early,
and that hierarchy has more or less maintained.
Yeah, it definitely has. They're definitely, I think, getting Ridge and Tyler more reps with, the twos and the ones a little bit, just like through walkthroughs and things like that, and also one-on-ones. But it's still been, Jabori, Giovanni, CJ, then Jack, and then Tyler and Ridge. Not in that order, but the top four is pretty solidified.
Okay. We're going to shift from quarterbacks for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say for a moment, I mean for like the next 30 minutes. You've written a couple articles that have touched on other areas other than quarterback, because there's other position group battles taking place. There's other more playing time being solidified elsewhere. One of the things you wrote about most recently is two transfer linebackers, Paul Moala from Notre Dame and Falanico, how you say it last name?
Yeah, Falanico.
Yeah, Falanico. It's Justin Falanico, correct?
Giuliano Falanico.
Giuliano, why I say Justin? Good Lord, just drew a blank. I'm blaming this on Dallas and my cat. Why did I say Justin? Anyway, Dallas, this is your fault for not being here. So Giuliano Falanico, Paul Moala. Based off what you've seen, the Paul Moala, there is injury concerns after blowing both Achilles tendons in Notre Dame. Giuliano Falanico seems to just kind of fallen in our lap based off of the coaching change at USC. How have first off, those two guys look like they're essentially starters at this point, correct?
Yeah, they both have pretty quickly, like from the jump, carved a role for themselves amongst this front seven. And it was actually something that Eck touched on media day. He said that he was really comfortable with his depth in the front seven. And when you look at the rotations, it's really scary how you can have Mujib Rufai, Favai, and Leo Tamba in like a stand-up outside linebacker type of role, and then rotate that, and then have Falanico, Moala, and still on your defensive line have like Nate DeGraw on there. It's really crazy that that's the rotation they have, but they're both getting a lot of time and making plays too. Which
one you wrote about the Polynesian connection?
Yeah,
from Moala, Falanico to Coach Ray Oswega.
Mm-hmm.
And Favai would fall in there as well, correct? Which one just kind of wild.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty wild for you, Vi, to get that collection of one. Look, we don't. It's not. It doesn't matter, of course, that they're Polynesian. We just care that they're on the team and they're good. It's just a background thing that's unique relative to what we've seen for a while. And your article also said, look, the connection with Coach Oswego was actually pretty instrumental in getting both those guys, Moala and Falanico, to Idaho. Yeah, no, they both really emphasized the fact, and they obviously, made sure that the whole team has been welcoming, which, they have been. They've kind of just joined on the sidelines, fit pretty well with that from what I've noticed. But yeah, they both kind of very clearly emphasize that Polynesian connection. And it is something that obviously was super important to them, that for them to make their decision to come over here. And yeah, I think they've fit right into this defense. Even when they're not on the field, I've seen them, helping out guys on the sidelines in terms of like teaching them and like trying to show them like a move to do on the next rep when they're in. And they've both been making plays. I think Moala's had like 2 or 3 plays where he's come to the outside on a stretch or a pitch, and if it was live, he would have gotten a tackle for loss. And there's been a couple plays where Falanico just went straight up the middle. And again, if it was live, it probably would have been a sack or a tackle for loss. So they're both making plays and both interacting with the team in ways that you would typically see leaders do. And yeah, that Polynesian connection seems to be pretty important for them, but for the team as a whole, they just fit right in. And with Moala specifically, because the question we're going to have until we're 80% through the season, blowing 2 Achilles tendons is we'll call it a not minor deal.
Yeah.
From what you've seen, I mean, he looks fine, correct? Just based off, I'm inferring that from what you've described. You haven't described any any way where it looks like he's holding back or it looks like there's concern about his recovery. He just looks like he's a starter.
Yeah, he's looked pretty healthy. Today's practice, he was like banged up a little bit, went to the trainer's table for like 2 seconds, and then he was right back out in the field, just normal practice, bumps and bruises type of thing. He's looked pretty healthy. I haven't seen any issue when it comes to that.
Which transition now to a different topic you wrote about, which is this. Now, this was also a theme in relation to how Idaho football's been for the last few years, except it's a different flavor with Rob Borish as our defensive coordinator. You wrote about the front seven looking like a relative strength for Idaho. We've talked about linebackers a little bit, but I just tell everyone what you've seen so far and like what you're seeing that led you to feel hey, the front seven is clearly a relative strength for Idaho's defense.
Yeah, I just think it's the seamlessness between the defensive line and the linebacking core, and that was something that I was kind of worried we might lose with all of the graduates and the people who left the team last year, because that was something that I think Idaho was really good on. That it truly felt like the linebacking core and the defensive line was one unit, just because of the communication and like how they kind of went into each other.
Just cutting in real quick. And there were a handful of guys who graduated last season who they were impact players for many years.
Yeah.
For example, like Trey Walker is one example, like Chuck Akano is another example who he wasn't quite the same player after he blew his Achilles, but he was still an impact player for sure.
He still led the team in sacks last year.
Exactly. Now, part of that's where he plays, but just as an example of the guys who left who played well, they were guys who'd been contributors for multiple years. That's part of why there was question about, hey, how is the you described essentially the transition between or the communication of play amongst front seven is pretty damn seamless, which is impressive because for a lot of guys, they haven't even been on campus that long. Yeah.
No, it's been really crazy how kind of seamless that transition has been. And obviously you have returning players. You have Nate DeGraw and Favai, who, are kind of like that anchor and that bridge between last year's defense and this year's. And then Leo Tamba coming back healthy. He's been playing really well. He's, from the jump been a starter or practicing as a starter, and he's been with the team as one. But yeah, I think it's just everyone buying in. I think that's what it comes down to, because learning a new defense, Eck pretty much said they're going to be in a 3-4. And also just having so much roster turnaround in that unit is crazy. And it would be something that for a lot of teams, would be really hard to overcome, but they've not missed a beat. And I was really surprised at how good they looked.
So you talked about the linebackers, talked about Nate DeGraw as well. Any other either new faces or just new contributors who stood out from the front seven so far?
Front seven, I have this bad habit of writing a lot of numbers down if I don't know their names and not coming back to it. But yeah, Mujib Rufai, he's been or I think that's Mujib Rufai. I have the roster right here.
And hey, Marten, while Teren's doing his research, do you mind grabbing the roster just so we can tag team, and Teren can also just say numbers if he needs to?
But yeah, Mujib Rufai has definitely shown out. He's been kind of like right in that rotation with Favai, Falanico, Moala, and Leo in the linebacking core. And additionally on the defensive side, number 99 has been really, really good. Devontae Keys, he's been performing really, really well. Sam Brown's made a couple good plays. Same with Tanner Brooks. Thank you. But yeah, they've honestly pretty much from the first rotation down to the second, it's been solid all the way around. But yeah, no, the front seven, I think, is going to be really, really strong again this year.
And okay, thank you for also giving listeners some names. Is back when I was a listener, it's just helpful to have names to be able to pay attention. So when you hear about, you hear Devontae Keys got a tackle, you get it. it takes you back to, like, hey, remember Tubbs the Club talked about that guy. An area for Idaho that people felt promising about in the spring, partially because the last handful of seasons, it would just be hard to be worse, is secondary defense.
Right.
In the spring, secondary looks significantly improved. However, we already talked about the quarterback continuity thing early on, which does impact it. So as far as what you've seen now, the secondary, I mean, is it, and you can compare it to last season as well if you need to. How's the secondary look?
Well, there's not going to be any more 10-yard off coverage consistently every single play anymore like there has been. So that's something people can be relaxed about. But yeah, I think even with the quarterback play and with, the competition being the competition, the secondary has still performed well. I think it's been I think the first couple days, it definitely was more of the offense's day when it comes to conversions and big plays and things like that. Now I think there's been a pretty healthy balance. The defense has been getting picks. They've been taking advantage of, maybe, tip balls or tip passes. Kenyon and Trainer had a couple one-on-one reps today, and Trainer took one, Kenyon took the other. It's competitive, which I think is something that a year ago we wouldn't have seen. It definitely would have gone probably to the offense. And I think just it being competitive is something that is really refreshing to see. And I think the secondary is going to be pretty solid this year.
A lot of people are going to be disappointed about that cushion of death going away. It's a shout out to our departed for the week co-host, Dallas Hammer. I'm sure he's listening, and I'm sure he is cracking beer somewhere after hearing about that 10-yard cushion going away.
No more speed outs, or no more easy speed outs.
So look, we've hit a ton of the position groups. Couple more questions I have. First, like, you've already hit on Alex Moore a little bit. Alex Moore is a guy that he'd been kind of a revelation in the spring because he shifted from wide receiver to tight end.
Right.
And suddenly when he shifts position groups, he goes from a guy who's kind of buried in the wide receiver depth chart to just immediately competing for starting position at tight end. And X been open about this too. We're going to see a lot more tight end action this season than we'd seen in a while. Just talk about the pass catchers in general, but also kind of start at tight end a little bit if you can, just because this will be different than it was last season. How are those hierarchies shaking out so far?
Yeah, well, wide receiver, the 1 and 2 are pretty much set. It's Trainer and Hatton. Those are the top two guys at wide receiver. After that, that's where it gets interesting. I think Jermaine Jackson has been getting a lot of reps with the ones. And I think that if there was going to be a solid depth chart right now, he would be kind of like the main slot guy. But Jonathan Dwyer has also been making a lot of plays, and he's number 21. He's a freshman, I believe. He actually got rookie MVP honors at the first practice. And then surprisingly, there was another freshman who they were giving a lot of reps to, is number 89. I think it's Hauser. Yeah, Tommy Hauser. He's a freshman from Post Falls. He's been getting a lot of reps too. So that's kind of like how the wide receiver is shaking, is like those two. Also, Michael Noyle. Michael Noyle's been right up there with getting reps with the ones with Trainer and Hatton. And then tight end, they've kind of been giving reps to anyone. It definitely seems like for the ones, especially in like the pass catcher type role from the tight end, it has been Alex Moore. That's been getting most of the reps. I think if the season were to start tomorrow, he would be the definitive starter. But like you said, Eck likes to use his tight ends. Connor Whitney has been getting a lot of reps as well. Dalton Cash has been getting a lot of reps. There's also been a couple other tight ends that I'm blanking on right now, but they're kind of like going through the whole rotation. Chance Bogan, he's been getting a lot of reps. But right now, I think
Chance Bogan, that's Idaho's transfer from not transfer. He initially committed to University of Washington, decommitted, came to Idaho.
All right. Yeah, he's been getting a lot of stuff too. And then it's really refreshing to see a deep rotation with this team that all have been getting reps and all have, been making plays. I mentioned Jermaine Jackson earlier. He was something that Matt Linehan mentioned when I talked to him about a guy who's really been making a lot of plays. Dwyer has been really performing. Again, he's kind of like Jack, a guy who is probably much more farther ahead as a freshman than people thought he was going to be. And then, Whitney, Cash, and Moore have just kind of been getting their rotation with throwing Chance Bogan in there as well. So I think that's kind of like the main group of tight ends and receivers that have been getting most of the reps with the 1s and 2s.
And one of our listeners and one of our favorite players on the team, because he's just fun as hell, Zach Borish. He's I know he's a slash. I mean, he plays all over the field, but he's also most part of playing on the field this season, the wide receiver group.
Yeah.
How has Zach Borish transitioning in this season from, last year? He's, for the most part, he just took snaps under center and ran straight up the gut on most plays. If he touched the ball, his role is radically different. We've talked about it. What have you seen with how X using Borish and how Borish has been responding to the new position?
Well, Zach, this is actually interesting. Zach has been running drills with the wide receivers, but when it comes to like the 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s, he hasn't been getting live reps in those type of drills. So, but when he's not getting those, he is working with a coach on the sideline, like still catching, still, making sure that he's still doing something. So, and I don't know what that reason is. I haven't talked to Eck or Zach yet about it. That was something I was planning on doing tomorrow. But I don't know if this is a thing where it's like Eck wants to keep those plays saved for right now, or if it's just making sure that Borish gets more time knowing the position and learning wide receiver before they throw him into 7-on-7 and 11-on-11s. Because they're also, and today was the first day of pads, full pads. So I'm wondering I don't know which way it's going, and I don't know for sure, but in drills, he's been looking pretty solid.
He's also doing kick returns as well, correct?
Yeah, I've seen him in a couple of kick return drills. Yeah.
Okay. That's a question we had from Tom Kendall in the comment thread. So I guess, look, we've hit almost all of the, broadly speaking, large position groups. Running back, I mean, I'll ask about running back. Running back is not that intriguing for me right now because I just know we've got a handful of guys who are solid, who are probably going to do a decent amount of rep splitting. But, I mean, hey, running backs, who stood out so far?
It definitely seems like it's still Roshan is kind of like the do-it-all back. He's the one who's been getting most of the reps, I think, in like 11-on-11s and 7-on-7s, and he's been doing really well with it. Andre was today, I think he's one of those running backs that as soon as you allow contact, he is going to do his best. Because today he had like 2 just 10-yard runs that he was just carrying people on his back like he does. Eli has been really surprising in the passing game. I think, and this was something that they mentioned in the running backs feature too that they posted on the Idaho Athletic site. He's looked like the best route runner out of all the running backs. He's looked like a legitimate passing option when he's been getting practice and getting reps. And Romano, he's also been practicing with the kick returners like he was, and he's looked pretty fast with the running backs, like a bit faster than he was last year. I don't think there's a set pecking order to it yet. What Eck said during media days it was Roshan and Eli at 1 with Nick and Andre having an opportunity to push for that. I think that Andre has pushed for it. I think Nick has also shown that he should get more reps. So I still think it's Roshan at the number 1 back, but after that, I think it's still yet to be determined.
And I guess special teams, that's one of the areas that Idaho, for example, Field goal kicking last season certainly was an issue for Idaho. Now, part of that was offensive line issues. Part of it was just some misses. I know that, look, Ricardo Chavez, that's the new place kicker. Who he's going to do some punting as well.
Yeah.
We know he certainly has a leg. From what you've seen in practice, I mean, I don't know how much you would have got to see him just based off how much you've talked about all the other groups.
Yeah.
But anything to add from what you've seen on special teams?
I haven't really seen that much in terms of kickoffs and punters. I think they've either been practicing amongst themselves or they kind of do it before practice officially starts, before I usually get there. I will say Ricardo won the battle axe today, I'm pretty sure. So that was, I think, Ricardo Chavez, number 10. He won the battle axe today. So I think he did well enough, to earn that. And I think, we've all seen, I think, the highlight clips on Twitter of him, looking pretty accurate when it comes to his kicking. So, yeah.
But it's still a little bit early to have much return so far on special teams from what you've seen.
Yeah. Okay. I think the jury's still out, but I will say that there is cautious optimism. I think that's appropriate for the special teams unit right now.
Okay. And again, the actual last question about position group is the offensive line is probably going to dictate a lot of how much of a turnaround can take place this season.
Yeah.
That's also a position Jason Eck told me at Media Day that Idaho's just we're going to be a little bit thin there because it takes years to develop guys, and this is just where we're at. How's the offensive line look so far?
It's definitely been, like X said, not the strongest position on the field. It's, they've definitely had their moments where they have probably given up, have probably had not the best practice. And I think that, the offense will improve. I think since practice started, they've been a lot better. But I do think that's probably going to be, as the season starts, that's going to be the one position where it's, a lot of defenses will take advantage of the most. That being said, I think Egg's done a really good job at trying to limit what the offensive line's weakness, like how much that can harm the team, without going into like too much about the formations and like the stuff I've seen. He's done a lot in terms of like adding a lot of misdirection and motion to the offense that I think, can take a defense by surprise. So I do think that the offensive line is probably the weakest position on the offense right now. I do think it's been improving as well, but I also think that Eck has kind of figured out a way to limit how bad that impact can be on the team.
Okay. So we're going to do a small shift, which I gave you no warning about. So, Teren, so far you've been talking exactly as people would expect a reporter to talk, and that you're explaining what you saw, and when you're giving observations, you're essentially attaching evidence to what you saw. I'm going to ask you to throw all that out the window for a second.
Okay.
And more, just you don't have to call it a hot take, but more just a little interpretive about that. How about that? Question one. If you had to pick who you think is going to finish as quarterback one, only based off what you've seen so far, and you don't get to see other practices, who would you pick?
CJ Jordan.
Okay. Is it close or not?
It's close.
Okay. Who would you put at number 2 then?
I would put Jabori at 2.
Okay. That makes sense. Different question.
Mm-hmm.
If Idaho has a turnaround type of season relative to last year, what are the top 2 position groups you think people are going to say those 2 groups look different than they did the last 9 years?
Tight end and cornerback.
Tight end and
Cornerback, yes.
Cornerback, okay. And out of those 2 position groups, which do you think is going to be the most in your face that it will be different?
Tight end, for sure.
Tight end, okay. And that's partially stylistic as well, in terms of we're just calling different plays, okay?
Yeah.
I think I know the answer. if Idaho does not make the kind of turnaround that Vandals hope they're going to make, what are two position groups that are going to not have made enough of a jump?
Cornerback and offense, or cornerback and quarterback, I think, are the two.
Cornerback and quarterback, though. Okay. From this far away, and because you covered the team last year, just culturally, and I don't mean this in like an abstract sense. I more mean this in the sense of like, hey, how players are experiencing the team and how fans are going to experience this new coming team. How different is the culture?
Oh, it's totally different. It's a complete 180. I mean, last year, I think after a certain point in the season, and I think a lot of people have been pointing to the EWU game as kind of like that point, you could kind of tell the team just wasn't feeling that season anymore. I think it's kind of hard to come back and have fun after, having 70 points put on you. But I think this year people are having fun. There's music playing on the Kibbe Dome speakers during practice. There's coaches celebrating with the players, getting involved, being active when it comes to the coaching. Not to say that, coaches weren't those things last year. But, this year it definitely seems to be like not only is the energy back, but people are having a lot more fun with it compared to last year, especially towards the end of the season where they weren't.
This is hot take world now.
Okay.
Let's pretend you don't get to see another practice.
All right.
But you'll get to watch again. You'll get to watch the game if you want to. Let's say like whatever practice you went to last was your last one.
All right.
Do you expect Idaho finishes over 500? We can't finish at 500 because we play 11 games.
Yeah, 11. I would say they finish at 5 wins.
Okay, so you think the fair prediction right now would be 5 and 6?
Yeah, but they're going to be competitive. I think even in their losses, they're going to be close losses.
So 5 and 6, that'd be 1 and 2 in the non-conference, and you'd project 4 and 4 in conference.
Yeah.
Okay. Based off being a student, based off of covering the team last year, 5 and 6. If this were Paul Petrino, who's been here forever. I mean, people would just say, hey, this is more the same thing because it'd be essentially more the same thing. Do you expect fans are going to be a little bit more sympathetic to a 5 and 6 this season?
I think they will be, with it being X first year. And again, I think it's going to be 5 and 6 with the caveat of those losses are going to be competitive. I think, every Vandal fan will take like a 24-21 loss to EWU compared to the 71-21 it was last year, or a 28-24 loss against Montana over 34-14. And I think that, with it being X first year, I think people are going to understand like, hey, this is pretty much a completely new team. It takes time. And also if the team is competitive, like I think they will be, then I think people are going to be like, yeah, we're losing, but we're like right there.
I think people take that. And we're going to jump to the ad read while we have live viewers. But before we jump to the ad read, Teren, we have the reversal next, which is where you get to ask me and Marten any question. It can be sports related. It can have nothing to do with sports as well. It's your call. You can think over what question you're going to go to while we go over the ad for our favorite sponsor and one of our favorite listeners, Hughes River Expedition, who's been supporting Tubs of the Club and for quite a while. So if you're looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. Venture into the largest protected wilderness in the continental U.S., located right here in the great state of Idaho. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River no return, the Salmon River Canyons, or the Selway, and you can even check out special trips like the one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, take in the history along the river, and fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the country. You just bring it close, let HRE handle the rest. Hughes River Expeditions has been Vandal owned and operated since 1976 and ready to take you on a vacation of a lifetime. What are you waiting for? Find out what it's like to grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 800-262-1882 or check them out at hughesriver.com. And Teren, back to you for the reversal.
All right. So for you, what would be your idea of a successful season? for the Vandals this year? What would you consider a success for this team?
So in terms of like a metric,
Mm-hmm.
Look, if Idaho finishes 6-5, that I think people have to be happy with that, because the Big Sky is just a deeper conference now than it was 10 years ago. Where, look, when Montana went on their streak, in the 90s to early 2000s, this just wasn't a conference that had 5 teams in it that have a case to not only make the playoffs but have a seed. And for Idaho if Idaho is a fringe playoff team, still competing for a playoff spot last week of the season, so that'd be 5-5 going into the Idaho State game.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd have to call that a resounding success. 5-6 is also potentially fun. Look, anything's going to be fine. Look, people gave Paul 2 years of winning no games, like 1 game. If Jason Eck only wins 5 his first season, whatever. But in a more descriptive sense, a successful season to me is going to be like if Idaho's losing games, it's because, for example, like you talk about offensive line, if we just don't have the horses on the offensive line that Eck has proven he can develop when he's at South Dakota State, it just takes 3 years to do it. If because we don't have those guys, we just have a smaller margin for error, which makes it harder to win all the games you should. Look, that's okay.
Right.
If we're not the worst passing defense in the league, and that's part of why we're losing, is because anyone can do whatever they want through the air, and we see significant improvement in the secondary, even if we're still, like 5-6-ish. Look, dude, guys, that's fine. We're seeing marked improvement. Guys need some time. Most Big Sky new coaches, if you look at them recently, Teren, look, the easiest example is you can look at as Troy Taylor, of a guy who turned things around in 1 year. But part of that was because the year before he was there, Sacramento State was just decimated injury-wise. So he got a healthy roster. Plus, he was a better coach than Jody Sears, and things just turned around. Most coaches who are successful, it takes at least a year to get your bearing. I mean, look at Montana. Bobby Hauck came back in 2018, and Montana fans are upset about how the Bob Stitt years went. Idaho fans would kill for disappointment like the Bob Stitt years right now. And still, Bobby Hauck finished 6-5 in his first year back in Montana. Bobby Hauck's one of the most successful coaches in the history of the Big Sky. Only thing he doesn't have is a championship. He took a year to get Montana, stabilized for playoffs. Jeff Choate at Montana State, who, look, he's the guy who pushed Montana State up to where they're at now. And again, Montana State didn't precisely bottom out prior to Jeff Choate being there. But his first season, they were sub 500. Jay Hill's first season at Weber State, they were sub 500. It just usually it takes a little bit of time. And look at our current batch of new coaches. I have no idea when things are going to turn around in Cal Poly. I still believe Bo Baldwin can do it, but look, we've seen he has some growing pains. Sure, Cal Poly's unique, but I don't care. It's still taking him time. And Chris Ball at Northern Arizona, they're like maybe a little bit better than they were than when he was before he was there. But the changes have been pretty minor in Northern Arizona. So look, I mean, things take a year. It takes time for a new coach to get all the guys he needs. So to circle back in a descriptive sense, if Idaho is showing improvement, if we're starting to see, if we're starting to see Idaho play in a way where you as a fan or you as a reporter can point to specific position groups and say, look, if we just get a little bit better on the offensive line, suddenly this is a winning team. That's more what I'm going to care about. And if that means we're 5-6 or we're 4-7, but we have a lot of close losses, whatever. That's I guess the descriptive part's a bigger deal to me.
So follow up to that, do you think that the Big Sky is kind of, I mean, obviously Montana is still going to be Montana. Montana State's probably still going to be Montana State, but with how many schools have either some kind of coaching turnaround or have lost key players, do you think that this year kind of like the hierarchy of like EWU always being in there, Sac State always being in there might get shaken up a little bit?
Well, don't look. The one correction I'm going to give, or the one thing I'll adjust there is Sac State being in there's last 2-year thing
recently, so, in terms of recent hierarchy.
Yeah. So, is this a year where the middle let's say the middle or like the second tier of the conference could look different. Is that
like the bottom half of playoff teams could be like instead of like what it was last year, it could be like Weber's back up there or something like that.
Oh, for sure. I think that the bottom half is open. Look, I'm going to point to UC Davis as an example. UC Davis made the playoffs. I was not that impressed with UC Davis throughout last season. They're not bad. They're a well-coached team. Dan Hawkins has won at places other than UC Davis. He knows what he's doing. But, was last year's UC Davis team talent-wise like miles ahead of a school like Idaho? No, I don't think so. Were they miles ahead of Weber State? No. I mean, Weber State, their unending question is, can they figure out a way to score once in a while? They have another new offensive coordinator, but I think the bigger deal is Jay Hill taking the Xanax in relation to Weber State trying to put points up on the board. But I absolutely think that, like you said, let's say the back half of teams competing for a playoff spot, we're just going to trust Montana State. They have talent and they've got solid coaching. They're probably not going to face plant in the upcoming season. Absolutely. I absolutely think that we could see a shakeup. You brought up Eastern. We're going to have our Big Sky preview overall next week, but look, you're right. Eastern they just graduated a Walter Payton Award winner. One of the stories, I talked to Ryan Collingwood, former Eastern reporter, and one of the things that just kind of went missed last season with how the coverage in Eastern evolved, Eastern Washington had a lot of sixth-year seniors who stayed in Cheney on last year's team. Well, they're not there anymore. Like Tallulah Limu-Jones who was the best receiver in the league last year. Well, he's not there anymore. Andrew Boston's not there anymore. They have some good guys coming in. Aaron Best has done fine retooling to the extent he needs to, but they're certainly going to take a step back at quarterback. There's no way not to. So identity, they're either going to take a step back or their identity is going to have to be different some sort of way. So in short, I do. Since you're here, I'm going to respond with, what about you?
I definitely think that the bottom half, EWU, they definitely, it's like all the things you said. They lost the 6-year seniors and they lost a Walter Payton Award winner, but they always find a way to replace really, really good players with more really, really good players. The fact that at quarterback, they've had Vernon Adams, Bo Levi Mitchell, and Eric Berrier in like a 10, 15-year span is ridiculous.
You also miss Gage Gubrud in there too.
It's just, they always find a way to retool. So I feel like until I see a down season, I can't really cut them out from like the guarantees. I think they're just in there until they're not.
I can tell you real quick, and then I'll stop interrupting you. Their quarterback's not going to be as good this year. Aaron Best told me that right now Gunnar Talkington is the starter, and they don't have a clear number 2. Now, that of course doesn't mean like things can change between media day and the first snap of the season. But Gunnar Talkington has been with the program. He stayed behind Eric Berrier. He's going to be the starter. We've seen Gunnar Talkington play some. Eric Berrier, he is not.
That's a good point. But I still just, even with that, I think they just kind of, they're in there until they're not. Do I think they're going to be like a top 3 offense like they were last year? Probably not, but I still think they're definitely going to be competitive in a lot of those games. Sac State, they're 2-time Big Sky champs. I really think that they're a team that just always finds a way to sneak up on people. So I think they're definitely going to be in that. I wouldn't associate them with Montana or Montana State, not on that level quite, but I think they're definitely a tier below that. I think if we're considering there's going to be like 6 Big Sky playoff berths like there was last year, it's the final 2 that I'm tripped up on. I think Idaho having Northern Colorado and Drake on the schedule this year is pretty good for them, just because Drake historically not a great program.
When you need that extra FCS out of conference win so that you don't have to go 7-1 in conference. Not shift back to you in a second, just so listeners, if you're new, especially the whole FCS thing, broadly speaking, school in a good FCS conference like Idaho in the Big Sky, South Dakota State in the Missouri Valley, if your team gets 7 FCS wins or 7 Division I wins, meaning you have 4 losses because it's an 11-game season, 7-4 is usually thought of as, hey, that's around the bubble, but if you're in a bigger conference, you're probably in at 7-4. With 8, we have 8 conference games. That's where the math of 7-1 to get 7 wins without the out-of-conference game comes.
Yeah, so considering that, I mean, if we just assume that FCS follows like the trend that they're paid to do to lose to the FBS teams, it's, you know, we'd be, and obviously it's year to year with FCS. We can't like really take last year's results too much into consideration, but Northern Colorado, I would consider that a win. Northern Arizona, it's a 50-50, but I think we win that. Portland State we beat last year. So including Drake, that's already 4 wins. That's already a match at where Idaho was last year. UC Davis, that team was competitive, and that was the game that CJ Jordan got out hurt. That's 5 right there. And then Idaho State. So it might play off like the scenario you described of like 5-5 heading into Idaho State, and then Idaho State possibly being that 6th win.
Yeah, 6-5 for Idaho. It would put us on the bubble, but if Idaho's 6-5, fans should probably expect we're on the outside looking in, or if we're 6-5 and we make it, it's because Idaho had some pretty big wins and then something like injuries early in the year. Explain a couple losses we shouldn't have had, because the committee, they use a simple rating system to calculate people's resume, but there is a little bit of understanding for things like injuries that the committee can take into account.
Yeah, so I think that Idaho's going to be in the mix. They're going to be on the bubble, like you said. I think it might come down to the last 2 weeks in terms of where like those last 2 or 3 spots in the Big Sky go in terms of who makes the playoffs. But I think it's going to be very competitive, especially like the middle part of the table.
Yeah, I'm going to hold a little bit of my take on Idaho because we still have next week. We're going to do our Big Sky preview. Mm-hmm. The week after that, we're going to do our Idaho, the entire season preview. And then the following week, we have a Washington State game that we're going to talk about. But look, what you're describing for Idaho it's kind of not different than if you look at the last few seasons and you simply say, look, if Idaho through different scheme wasn't throwing some games away, well, that is a fringe playoff team if you weren't throwing some wins away. Like I'd been told separately, off the record is in like, I can't tell you who the source is, but I can tell you a very good source told me that Montana coaches considered Idaho to have top 3 talents in the Big Sky last season, but the worst coach. And that was why they believed Montana coaches felt Idaho finished the way they did.
It's hard to argue that point. If you look at Idaho players from the Petrino era who made it to the NFL, Idaho is tied with EWU for the most active players from the Big Sky in the NFL. So it's hard to argue the point that team was really, really talented, but just underachieved.
Yeah, that's and look, and Rob Orich was on our show, and look, he did it diplomatically, but it's hard to talk about what you as a new coach want to do different without it being understood as subtext. You want to do it different because it was done poorly or not as well, at the very least, prior to when you were here. An example too is like our secondaries. Again, I've brought it up. We were, depending on the metric you look at for pass defense last season, Idaho was the worst or the second worst. We're in just a death match with Idaho State for who could give up the most yards and touchdowns through the air. We didn't have this radical turnover in terms of we have complete new talent at secondary. Yeah. We have a lot of guys who the names are going to be familiar.
Marcus Harris, Josh Jones.
Exactly. It's just scheme's going to be different, and coaches believe that will be enough. For not enough, long term, but in terms of will we be better, that seems like they believe they certainly should be better next year. Based off what you said you've seen, looks like we should expect to be better. We're at an hour, Teren, so we're going to start to round things off. But before we shift over to producer Marten and his no notice producer Marten sports ticker, I know he can give a little bit of update in the sports ticker because he went to a soccer game. Anything else football wise you want to bring up before we begin the process of closing the bar?
Just that I think fans will see a different Idaho team this year, and I think it'll be an exciting one for them.
Okay. You heard it here first. That's Teren Kowatsch, who actually my true last question before we shift over to Marten. There's going to be a new beat reporter for covering Idaho football for Lewiston. Mm-hmm. Will you you're still going to be covering sports for Lewiston Tribune?
The plan right now is for me to be part-time after my current news desk internship ends. But yeah, assuming that I continue to keep working for the Tribune, part-time sports, I'll still be around a little bit.
Okay. Teren, we may, and you follow Idaho football anyway, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. We may message you once in a while as in case you're interested in coming on as a non-reporter to talk Idaho sports. But
I would definitely be interested in doing that.
Thanks for your time. And also, hey, when Marten throws in a sports ticker, still just consider yourself a co-host for the next 3 minutes.
All
Marten, producer Marten, the sports ticker, something that we were off last week. We had our Tubbs call. One of the things some of our patrons talked about is, hey, they like not having full segments about some of the non-premier sports, but if there's any news relating to some of the non-football, non-basketball sports, they don't mind sharing that real quick. So we invented, meaning we did not do any planning for this, the producer Marten sports ticker. So producer Marten, start sports ticking.
Yeah, so there wasn't a whole lot this weekend. Sports kind of just started picking up. Volleyball had their first camp. The one note is Vandal Soccer won their scrimmage against the University Calgary Dinos 2-0. It was a very much got a goal early and then kind of got a late goal against a very good Canadian college team, and that's it. Their next game is against UW, the University of Washington, on the 11th. Then their first home game is on August 28th, I believe.
So, sorry, what was the soccer? Who'd they play?
The University of the Calgary Dinos, a Canadian college team.
When you saw Canadian college, did you have any sort of Simon Fraser PTSD?
No, this team was Dinos. It was way different. Cooler logo, cooler team.
Okay. Radically different. Is that the and no, producer Marten, you can tell us about the LED lights.
Oh yeah,
that's
the LED lights that they put in are very nice. If you check out the soccer highlight, the goal they posted, the Savannah Foster's goal, it's very small. It's hard to see with the day games lights, but it'll be very cool for the 6 p.m. kickoff homecoming game.
Yeah, which is LED lights inside the Kibbie Dome have been installed. They're much more, let's say, versatile in terms of what you can use them for in terms of game production. And
I know somebody else that'll be loving them and will be wanting to include them in his shows too.
Okay. Hell yes. All right, Marten, that is the producer Marten Sports Minute or Sports Ticker. Do you want to be the Sports Ticker or the Sports Minute?
Marten Minute. Let's go with that in the future.
We'll go with the Marten Minute. So that had a cousin of the Mountaineer Minute from shows past. Well, hey guys, I already talked over the schedule, but we're back to weekly right now for Tubbs. As the season progresses, we're of course going to have reaction episodes. We may still trying to figure out how to make it work. Have Power Rankings podcast that just comes out on Sunday nights. Think of this Big Sky After Dark. In which it'd be producer Brian, your worst producer, and whoever the hell I can get on the show to run through the league real quick. But that's kind of the big thing. We have new merch. It's been ordered. It's going to be shipped out to patrons the moment it gets to my door. If you're interested in that stuff, join us at Only Tubbs at patreon.com/Tubbs at the club. That should have been hashtag Only Tubbs at patreon.com/Tubbs at the club. If you don't want to do a Patreon thing but want to support the show, just message us. We'll find a way to get that support over to us. At this point, Teren Kowatsch, thanks for coming on. Follow Teren real quick. Tell people where to find you online.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active, at TKCHawk13. If you have any questions for any stories, tkowatsch@lmtribune.com is my email. Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me again.
You're the president of the Drew Lock fan club, correct?
I'm more of a Geno guy.
Ouch.
Honestly, I'm more of a Geno Smith guy right now.
I honestly think there is no good answer to that question. That's why
there is not. It's really bad for us right now.
But again, Teren, thanks for joining us. Everyone knows producer Marten. He's going to play us out with whatever the hell he wants. And until next time, guys, go Vandals.
Go Vandals.